Hey guys, Spudknocker here, as always, and today we are going to do our very first helicopter tutorial on the Spudknocker YouTube channel. Now I know a lot of you guys out there, including myself, are very hyped for and very excited about the upcoming Mi-24 Hind attack helicopter. It is a beast of a helicopter and I cannot wait to get my hands on it. But I also know that I've concentrated on fixed-wing aircraft for the entirety of my playing of DCS World, and I'm sure I'm not alone out there. And so I've been spending a lot of time trying to prepare and get into helicopters and do the best job I can to get ready to hop right into the seat of that Mi-24 and get ready to go. Subsequently, we've got a couple Mi-24s off our left shoulder over here, hanging out here on this airbase in the middle of Damascus with us. I believe this is Meza Air Base. So we're going to go ahead and get ready to head out on a convoy escort mission, but first we have to actually start up our Mi-8 HIP helicopter that we have sitting here in front of us today. Now the Mi-8 and the Mi-24 share a lot of similarities, just like the AH-1 and UH-1 series of American helicopters share a lot of their engines, airframe components, avionic components, and so on. We can even see quite a few similarities between the Mi-8 HIP we have here in front of us and the Mi-24s we have off to our left here. We can see that the engine nacelles, the tail rotor assembly, and the rotor hub look all very similar between the two helicopters. Now, this is a very confusing cockpit layout to get used to, as well as a very complicated startup procedure. And if you look at guides like, say, Chuck's guide, for instance, it seems very intimidating. And it was for me as well, until somebody sat down with me and actually walked me through it. So that's what I want to do for you guys today, is to make the startup procedure of the Mi-8 HIP as simple as possible, so that way you guys can jump right in and get prepared for that Mi-24 coming, hopefully soon. So let's go ahead and hop in the cockpit and get started. Now, of course, we've got the ugly bluish-green color that the Russians love to put on the inside of their helicopters, aircraft, airliners, bombers, etc. Anything with wings or a rotor on it, really. And we can see that, of course, true to style, the Russians have massive banks of buttons, switches, dials, and circuit breakers. And so in the Mi-8, we have three seating positions that we can choose to take control of the helicopter from. We have the captain's seat, which is the left-hand seat here. If we press 1 on our keyboard, if we press 2 on our keyboard, it'll bring us to the right-hand seat, or the co-pilot seat on the right-hand side of the helicopter. And if we press 3, it brings us to the flight engineer seat in the center between the two pilots on our left and on our right. Do please note that you can fly the helicopter and manipulate the flight controls while sitting in the center seat position. I find it to be a little bit more difficult to fly the helicopter from the center position, and I prefer to be in the left-hand position, as that's kind of where I started flying the helicopter from. However, for the startup procedure, I very much prefer to be in the center position in the flight engineer seat, because it makes it very easy to see and actuate any switches or buttons that we need to press as we start up the helicopter. So, true to form for the Russians, we have massive banks of circuit breakers up here. And for the sake of simplicity, again, this is not going to be the most true to form, most accurate startup procedure that you can possibly do in the Mi-8, but it'll get you 99% of the way there and just get you into that cockpit and ready to go to just get practicing and ready for that Mi-24. So first thing we're going to do is we're just going to hit the lever that tosses the entire bank of these circuit breakers. We're just going to go ahead and throw all of these to the on position. For the most part, these ones on the right-hand side of this vertical divider are going to be for flying the helicopter and systems on the helicopter, whereas these ones on the left-hand side are going to be for weapons systems and using the different weapons that are on the helicopter. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to come to a panel just above the co-pilot's head right here labeled DC Power. First thing we're going to do is we're going to turn on both batteries. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to come down and to the right to the AC Power panel, and we're going to turn on the inverters to the automatic position. You should hear some electronic current start to flow through the wires and gauges of the aircraft itself. Next, we're going to go ahead and turn on all three of the rectifiers. And at this point, we're ready to go ahead and turn on the APU. Next thing we're going to go ahead and do, just to make sure we don't forget it, is we're going to go ahead and turn on the generators right here, generators 1 and 2, back on the AC power panel. Next, we're going to go ahead and come to the fire detector test panel, and we're going to go ahead and put it to the fire exiting position here, so that way the fire system will automatically extinguish any fires that it detects within the aircraft itself. Next, we're going to go ahead to the APU starting panel here. I highly recommend that you turn the cockpit to the English labels cockpit rather than keeping the old Russian labels, or you're just going to get very frustrated and very put out with trying to get this helicopter started up, or even flying it, or trying to do anything in this aircraft itself. Next, we're going to go ahead and go start on the APU position here, and we're going to press the start button. We can see the APU ignition is on, and we're going to go ahead and turn on all of the fuel pumps to make sure that our 2 turbines are ready to start up as well. As the APU comes on, we're going to see oil pressure normal and RPM normal. That's the 2 green lights we want to see before we actually crank the engines. Next, we're going to crank the left-hand engine first. We're going to put the engine starting switch into the start position, and we're going to go ahead and press... First we're going to go ahead and undo the rotor brake here. Then we can go ahead and press the engine start here. We can see auto ignition on, starter on. And if we look at the temperature gauge down here, we can then come up real quickly and turn off the fuel cutoff switch up on the roof of the helicopter to give fuel to the turbine to start its startup procedure. And we can see the RPMs are starting to climb. And once our RPM reaches about 90% and starts to stabilize, our rotor will be spinning very fast to the point we won't be able to see it anymore. It'll just look like a nice blur. And we go ahead and start up our right-hand engine at this point. So we can just go here, bring it over to the right-hand position, start this engine, look at the temperature gauge as it starts to rise, go up here to the fuel cutoff valve, allow fuel to flow to that turbine, and we can see our engine 2 RPM needle start to rise as well to go up and stabilize at 90% RPM. And we can see our engine temperature gauge fluctuating as well. That's what we want to see. While we're over here, we can go ahead and uncage the radar altimeter for our left-hand pilot seat. As the right-hand turbine is starting to stabilize in its startup procedure, we can come to this panel right here at about the 10 to 11 o'clock position in the left side of the cockpit, and we're going to turn on the fan, the attitude indicator, the gyro cutout, the pitch limb system, and the audible warning system. We're going to come to the same panel on the opposite side of the cockpit, on the right hand side of the cockpit, and do the same thing. We're going to flip all of these switches, make sure that everything is good to go, and essentially you want to throw all of the switches that are present around the fan switches here. If you see your fans running here and here to keep your pilots cool, you know that you've done it correctly, and the aircraft will have all of its main systems up and running for you and ready to go. Next, we want to come down here to the center panel and turn on the autopilot SAS channels for the pitch, roll, and yaw. You want to have 3 green lights on this guy. As you fly the helicopter, periodically the generators that we turned on over here will fail if we get to too low or too high of an RPM setting on our engines, and these autopilot SAS channels will automatically turn off when the electrical power to the avionics blinks as a result of the generators failing and then turning themselves back on automatically. As a result, I highly recommend having these 3 buttons bound on your HOTAS so that you can easily swipe your thumb across a hat switch and get all 3 yaw, roll, and pitch SAS autopilot buttons back to the on position. It'll very, very much help you. Next, I also like to go ahead and set up my weapons switches to the on position for the main switch and master power switch here. We know that we have power to the weapon systems when we have these yellow lights above the weapon power panel lit up and ready to go. And then finally, I like to come over to the weapon select panel here and have the weapon select switch up to the UPK position so that it is selected to my gov pods to start off. In case I accidentally fire the weapons, it's not going to be quite as destructive as launching a bunch of rockets. With these switches into the on position for the power for the weapon systems, all we have to do to make the aircraft ready to actually engage targets is to simply come up to this large switch over the top of the captain's seat to the on position, and when we have this red light illuminated, we know that we have the weapons ready to go to engage targets, whether that's with your gun pod by having it in the UPK position, grenade launchers in the RKT position, and rockets into the RS position. Next, we can go ahead and shed a little bit of light on the instruments by turning on some instrumentation lighting. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and get ready to actually take off. So I'm going to press 1 on our keyboard and bring us back to the captain's position on the left-hand side of the cockpit. And I always feel that the cockpit, the pilot's position in the left-hand side of the cockpit is too far down. And I have to stretch my neck up with track IR to see the gun sight for launching rockets, firing gun pods, etc., etc. Now, to rectify that, to change your seating position slightly, you can hold right control, right shift, and 8 on the numpad to raise up your seat or lower your seat as well. And this works for any module. You can move your position left, right, up, down to get your seating position where you need it to be. When you go to, say, an external view and you come back, your new seating position or your new center of view for where you're sitting in the cockpit is automatically saved. Now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to press our brake switch, and we're gently going to release this brake switch in order to turn off the initial pressurization for the pneumatic braking system on the wheels of our helicopter. We're going to gently bring the pedals to the left to get lined up on the taxiway, and we're gently going to push the cyclic forward. And we're going to return it to the center position. If we want to speed up a little bit, we can push the cyclic forward again. And if we want to slow down, we can simply press our brake handle. So we'll go ahead and push the cyclic forward again to continue our taxi. And it's going to feel extremely mushy because the helicopter is generating lift from those rotor blades. It's not going to sit on the wheels nearly as heavy as, say, a jet that is just sitting with all of its weight on the wheels, generating no lift at taxi speed. We're going to gently press on those brakes now that we're out in a safe place for takeoff. And we can see a couple of Mi-8 hips, a couple of Mi-24s around us. And lastly, we can go ahead and shut our window here and make it a little bit quieter for us. We're going to gently bring our stick back and to the right-hand side. We'll go ahead and up our controls indicator for you. And then we're going to bring in some right rudder. And for takeoff, we're just going to very, very gently and slowly bring up the collective. I'm holding the brakes so that way we don't roll for a nice level takeoff here. Whoop, that was a little squirrely. Now we're above the ground. We're going to bring up the collective more and more and more. And we're just going to make a nice, gentle, and easy takeoff to continue on our convoy escort mission here. I'm going to go ahead and hit the trimmer button to reset the center position of my rudders and my cyclic. And at this point, we'll just continue on our mission. If you guys enjoyed this video, and if you found it to be very helpful, please let me know in the comment section below. And I can definitely make more Mi-8 HIP videos as we get ready for the very cool attack helicopter that should be coming in the very near future. We'll go ahead and we will see you guys in the next one. Fly safe out there, and of course, please stay healthy.